Good morning. This is Jason Dean coming at you again for a new Film Fanatic show. I want to thank again. There's been quite a few new subscribers the last few weeks, which has been really great. A lot of people commenting on these videos, so I can't do this whole crazy thing without all the support. And thank you so much for all the support and getting this channel to grow and grow and grow over time. So it's been a blast. I've been just really loving it, just enjoying it more and more. Always thinking of ideas. There's a lot of things that I still want to try and do with this channel, and always thinking of new ideas. So one thing I've been doing, which I started last month, but then I've been also covering, you know, I just recently uploaded two newer films that just came out recently. But I always go back to my favorite genre, and that is, the world of horror exploitation. And the movie I want to talk about, especially, again, I've always talked about special effects, and I'm a practical effects guy through and through, like without a doubt. And that's my jam. I always, and I think it's like one of those things. I do feel with just in general, like it happens in music, and I think it happens in art where there's like things kind of cycle back. There are a lot of things tried for the first time. To lots that were very successful. Like when you think of bands in the '60s and '70s that were recording albums, and by today's standards, those techniques might be looked at as like archaic or outdated or just harder to do. And then the same thing with films. I mean, films were all when you think of the films done in the '60s and '70s, compared to where technology is now. Obviously, there is no comparison, but there's something about music and art in general that was created in the '70s and in the '80s that gave it this extra kind of grit or something that was a little bit more tactile, a little bit more organic. And I do feel like I've seen that, in horror films, and I've also seen it in bands, in more say contemporary albums that are coming out, where bands are starting to kind of return to recording music. And it also depends on the context of what that artist or artists are trying to do. But I've seen that where bands are starting to go back to doing things where it might be a little bit more of a raw sounding production. And I tend to like things that just have. I mean, I love pop music too. Don't get me wrong, and I love things that have that real crystal clean or pristine sound. But overall, and it's all about the context. But overall, I love when my art that I ingest is a little bit kind of rough around the edges, a little bit dirty, a little bit nasty. And I've seen that with recordings, of like more recent bands that have been putting out new albums. There's been a little bit of a return to the kind of the old school way of recording. And when it comes to horror films, especially, with now we're like, I don't know, almost 2 decades into like the world of where CGI is pretty rampant in films, action movies, and fantasy films, horror films. So, and I think that has been shifting back to where I'm starting to see more of a return of the use of practical effects, which was, which is, the reason one of the components of why I love the horror exploitation world so much is because, I mean, the biggest name out there obviously is probably Tom Savini, but then you have, so many other great, Rob Bottin and so many other great effects guys, but there's something tactile. It's extra, and I love the magic of like seeing how some of these effects were pulled off because it's all man made. It's all handcrafted. There's no like, a lot of the times when these films were being made in the 80s, they didn't have the luxury of doing sometimes even another take because they'd have to spend even more money just to set the shot up to get the effects right. It couldn't be digitally enhanced or there couldn't be any, there was no use of any computer graphics at that time or technology. So it's very, very hard to do those kinds of scenes and to do those shots. But there's an extra magic to that. So one of the topic of today's show is going to be on the effects of pretty much my favorite zombie horror exploitation movie of all time, and that is Burial Ground. I've done lots of shows on this movie. But I'm going to be talking about the team or the folks responsible for the effects, the practical effects on this film, because I just think the the practical effects, the zombie effects, the zombie design, the gore for for this amazing film is just unlike any other. It's my favorite of this genre, and I just think the special effects are just it's such a it's this movie. I don't know. I was describing it to, and I've done multiple shows on this, but this is going to be about the effects, the special effects, and particularly it's going to be about Gino Rossi, who was the effects guy who designed all the practical effects, all the gore, all the zombies in this film. So it's going to be centered mainly on Gino Rossi. A couple of weeks ago I was recommending this movie to a buddy, and I was like, he hadn't seen this film. It came out in 1980. It's one of the classic, one of the greatest Italian films ever made, and it's just it's such an inspiring film too. I just love this movie to death. And I was describing it to my buddy as like, well, it's my favorite zombie film, but it's so dirty and nasty and raw that you'll probably have to take a shower after you watch it, because that's how I feel about this movie, and that's really due to Gino Rossi's effects in this movie. So I want to talk about that aspect of it. Of course, it was directed by Andrea Bianchi, and I did a show on him. I believe like 3 or 4 weeks ago as a director. Just a tremendous Italian director. He made so many great horror exploitation movies in the 80s, 70s and 80s. But I haven't really done too many shows on this channel about. I believe I did a show on Tom Savini, but I mean, when you think about these kinds of movies, it's all about the practical effects. So I was like, you know what, I need to cover. I should take a deep dive and talk about some of the great effects creators. So Gino Rossi was the uh, primary effects designer for this film, and also Rosario Prestopino also was the two of them as a team pretty much did all of the effects, pretty much all of the budget too. It's interesting reading about the work of Gino Rossi and Rosario uh, Prestopino. They pretty much the entire budget that they had for this film, which was not a lot. I mean, this came out in 1980, went to the special effects, and it's absolutely stunning what these guys were able to do. I mean, the the gore and the practical effects in this movie are just like unlike anything else. It's all handmade. It's all handcrafted. It literally is some of the grossest shit you'll ever see on the big screen. And again, it's the amazing know-how of how these guys were able to do so much creativity for so little, like with having such a tiny little budget. In comparison to a movie that could, a movie that comes out today where, your average budget for a film is just, insanely high. I mean, you almost can't even fathom it. And when you think that these guys were making, these kinds of movies, and this in particular, this film, it's staggering. I mean, doing so much for so little, and it still looks great. It still is so gritty and realistic, and just just gross. Like this movie's literally gross, and it's all due to the incredible effects that these guys did. I mean, just amazing. I mean, the direction of this film, the cinematography, the music. I love the music for this film, but when it comes down to it, it's really, these guys delivered the goods when it came to the practical effects that they were able to create. I mean, it's pretty staggering. It really is when you think about it. So much for so little. One of the things too, when I'm thinking of ideas for these shows and talking about picking a movie like, for instance, Burial Ground, which is just a masterpiece, is like, again, coming up with ideas of like taking a little bit of a deeper dive, like exploring uh, the cast, exploring, the finding out more information about who directed a lot of these films, who did the practical effects, and it's pretty revealing, and it just kind of opens up this whole other world. And one of the things that I see that happens a lot in the world of exploitation, it's interesting. It's like there's been a lot of, well, directors, producers, actors, composers, effects designers that like either kind of got their start in the world of exploitation, which you see, which is really common, across the board, and then they went on to become, kind of household names in their respected fields, and usually going on to uh, doing films in the big budget Hollywood world. That's like a pretty common thing. And then the other thing that I see a lot uh, in terms of this kind of situation is that there are a lot of actors and directors and producers. I probably see it more with actors, but where might have some really high profile actors or directors, if you will, but mostly I see it around with actors that had a series of really big kind of Hollywood movie hits, and then they kind of, for whatever reason, they lost their their the box office credibility. They just weren't making as much money. Their films weren't making as much money, and they became, they were, and that's one of the reasons I hate kind of the Hollywood system. But they were at one point maybe A-list actors, popular actors in popular movies, and then some of their films over time just kind of, were not making money, and they just kind of faded away. But then they also went on to diving into the world of exploitation, where a lot of these actors started doing, super low budget films. So it's real interesting how that that transition of, like, I think, well, like, an example of like a director who started off in the pure exploitation world and went on to become a very commercially known director, Bob Clark. Perfect example of that, I think. And then actors that I can think of that had the kind of the reverse role, where they were really big actors, A-list actors, but then they eventually kind of like went into the world of exploitation because they just weren't making enough money with their films. But like actors like Jack Palance or you know um, what's his name? I'm trying to think. Chuck Connors is a perfect example where he was a very high profile actor, and then his career kind of went a little bit down by the wayside, and then he went into making all of these like super low budget films. So it's interesting how that happens. And then you do have actors that have sustained and been phenomenal in their respected genres, especially in the exploitation world. But Rosario Prestopino, again, one of the effects designers for Burial Ground. I mean, looking up some of the films that he went on to do, it's pretty staggering. He went on to be the effects guy for Caligula, which is wild. Uh, Dario Argento's opera. Also, he was the effects guy for the New York Ripper. Wow, that's amazing. That movie is absolutely amazing. That's just a masterpiece. One of Lucio Fulci's best movies. Oh, just an amazing movie. I have to watch that movie again. He also did the effects for The Church, Amazonia, the Catherine Miles story, Doctor Butcher M.D., which I own that as well. That movie is a fucking masterpiece as well in the world of exploitation. The Barbarians. I mean, it's super cool to find all of this shit out of like who some of these directors, or the in this case the effects guys, other movies that they went on um, to work on. It's super fascinating. And Gino De Rossi, the other effects guy, man, it's crazy. I mean, he worked on some of the effects. I mean, he's still alive and kicking. He worked on Casino Royale, which was the debut of Daniel Craig as James Bond. He worked on that film, which is just wild. Um, Amazing. Probably, I'm a huge James Bond fan, and that's probably the best one ever. I think it is. Daniel Craig is definitely. I love the old school James Bond films, but I do feel like overall Daniel Craig was the best. He also worked on The Last Emperor, which is totally wild. Hudson Hawk with Bruce Willis. Um, City of the Living Dead, another masterpiece. Um, Cannibal Ferox. He also did the effects on the original Inglorious Bastards, which I didn't realize. Of course, I only knew of Inglorious Bastards being the Quentin Tarantino movie, but that was essentially kind of a remake. And he worked on the original. A Walk in Time, The Adventure Continues. Um, just wild. And so this is kind of the example of these two effects guys going on and doing like somewhat commercial films, but great films, and it's super fascinating seeing like the trajectory of a lot of these guys. Um, but Gino De Rossi and Rosario Prestopino were the creative team responsible for Burial Ground, which again is my favorite zombie horror exploitation movie. This beautiful edition was put out by Severin. It's one of my prized possessions. Severin, of course, knocks it out of the park all the time. There's really good, great special features on here. Yeah, I can't say enough good things, but definitely check this out if you haven't seen it, and if you happen to see any films that where you can see that the effects were created by Gino De Rossi or Rosario Prestopino, definitely check it out. Two legends, absolute legends in the world of movie making and especially in the world of exploitation. Thanks again and have a great day. Peace.